Hi everyone, welcome back to the Good to Know channel. Oh man, pull up a chair and grab a coffee or something stronger because today's story is going to hit like a freight train. It's the kind of update that's been whispered around in the corners for years, but now it's blasting into the open. Prior to getting started, I want to ensure that you know that this video is for educational purposes only. It's not medical advice and it doesn't replace any guidance from your qualified healthcare practitioner. Always consult your doctor about vaccines, treatments, or health decisions for yourself or for your children. So let's get into it. So hang with me on this, folks, because today I'll be showing you some footage that you won't catch on your traditional media outlets. The raw Senate testimony, the leaked documents, the insider confessions that finally pried this open. Picture this. For decades, if you've dared question the holy grail of vaccines doesn't cause autism, you'd get shut down faster than a bad joke at a family dinner. But just last month, in a move that's got the whole world buzzing, the CDC, yes, the Center for Disease Control, quietly reversed its long-standing position. They updated their website to say that the claim vaccines do not cause autism isn't backed by rock-solid evidence. Studies haven't ruled out a link between infant shots and autism development. Folks, this isn't some fringe blog post. Could it be that the CDC is admitting that the science might not be as settled as they've been drilling into our heads? And honestly, it's about time someone cracked open that door. Let me take you back a bit, because this reversal didn't happen in a vacuum. It's the tip of an iceberg that's been chilling under the surface, built on studies like the one from the Henry Ford Health that got buried deeper than my grandma's secret cookie recipe. But before I get into the study of the data, statistics, and claims discussed in this section, they are presented for informational purposes only. Individual health can vary, so this video is not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical guidance. Always speak with a licensed healthcare practitioner or your provider regarding any vaccines or health-related questions. Now I'm talking about the 2020 birth cohort study, the robust real-world data tracking of over 18,000 kids for a full decade using electronic medical records from one of the top health systems in the country. What did they do? Well, they compared vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. The results? Staggering. Heartbreakingly clear. Vaccinated kids were 4.29 times more likely to develop asthma. That's a 329% higher risk of wheezing through playground tag. We're looking at 5.53 times the odds for neurodevelopmental disorders, including stuff like developmental delays and speech issues, a whopping 453% jump. Autoimmune diseases, 4.79 times more likely, or to put it in perspective, a 379% increase to risk, setting kids up for lifelong battles with their own immune systems. And get this, in the unvaccinated group, there were 0 cases of ADHD, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, or tics. 0. While the vaccinated side tallied in the hundreds. Over 57% of vaccinated children ended up with at least one chronic condition, often multiples, compared to just 17% of the unvaxxed. It's like night and day, and a survival curve for the study shows vaccinated kids' health were tanking early and hard. This study was buried so deep, most doctors have never heard of it, until one man forced the numbers into light under oath. On September 11th, 2025, we're just talking fairly recently here, Attorney Aaron Siri walked into the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations and read these exact findings into the congressional record from the massive Henry Ford Health System birth cohort study done in Detroit. The study still hasn't been released to the public, and the mainstream media, dead silent. Here's the moment it finally saw daylight. Take a listen to the video.
In early 2020, I received a copy of the study. It showed the results of the analysis comparing children enrolled in Henry Ford from 2000 to 2016 from birth onward who had no vaccines compared to those who had one or more vaccines. The study was based on actual medical records. Meaning, finally, a large vaccinated versus unvaccinated study using health data from a major United States health institution, something, as the IOM pointed out, never existed before. The study began by explaining it set out to reduce vaccine hesitancy by assuring parents the CDC vaccine schedule is safe. Instead, what these researchers found was that vaccinated children had 4.29 times the rate of asthma, 3.03 times the rate of atopic disease, 5.96 times the rate of autoimmune disease and 5.53 times the rate of neurodevelopmental disorders, which included 3.28 times the rate of developmental delay and 4.47 times the rate of speech disorder. All of these findings were statistically significant. There was also other conditions for which there were numerous cases in the vaccinated group, but zero in the unvaccinated group. Hence, a rate cannot be calculated, including brain dysfunction, ADHD, learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and tics. For example, there were 262 cases of ADHD in the vaccinated group, and there were none in the unvaccinated group. In this study, there were around 16,000 kids in the vaccinated group, by the way, and around 2,000 in the unvaccinated group. So the rate, of course, between those is important, and that's what the study compared. These findings were troubling, including because these chronic health issues can be caused by immune system dysregulation, and vaccines can cause immune system dysregulation. Citations for this are in my written submission. Overall, the study found that after 10 years, 17% of the unvaccinated children had a chronic health issue, while 57% of the vaccinated children had at least one chronic health issue, often multiple. That's 17 versus 57%. The only real problem with this study and why it didn't get submitted for publication is that its findings did not fit the belief and the policy that vaccines are safe. Had it found vaccinated children were healthier, it no doubt would have been published immediately.
That was on the Senate floor, under oath on live record, and crickets from every major network. Let that sink in. But here's the gut punch. Gold standard design, real electronic records, no cherry picking, and this study never saw the day of light. Why? Lead researcher Louis Lamorato, PhD, swore in Senate testimony on page 9. She didn't want to make the doctors feel uncomfortable, while another co-author said that he was scared of losing his job. That's not my opinion. That's the official record. U.S. Senate, September 2025. Funding threats, career annihilation, the full smear campaign. The full smear machine. The truth was simply too dangerous, so they buried it. In fact, Del Bigtree put it perfectly in the documentary An Inconvenient Study when he said this is about anyone who dares to challenge the vaccine cash cow. Take a listen to the video clip here.
It appeared to me that Henry Ford was pro-vaccine, not anti-vaccine. So I had to assume the only reason they would do this study was to prove us wrong.
Del and I thought that was an excellent opportunity. They can do the comparison and presumably they could get it published.
We only had one request.
The ask was, whatever the outcome, you publish it. Would he stick to that if the results show that unvaccinated kids are healthier? And when he realized that if he submitted that for publication, he's going to face the wrath of his entire profession? Didn't know.
This was our greatest fear. I mean, vaccines are the holy grail of modern medicine, and anyone that decides to challenge vaccines in any way are essentially considered heretics.
That heretic label Del just described, board-certified nephrologist and co-author of Dissolving Illusions, Dr. Suzanne Humphries, lived the reality of it. The moment she started digging into the real history and data, the media and her own colleagues turned on her like she'd admitted treason. Here's what happened to one honest doctor who refused to stay silent. Take a listen.
Most doctors can't tolerate being called quacks or having their reputation destroyed. And I went from treating at the head of the laboratory at my hospital for hypertension to becoming, somebody that was doubted on every levels after a while because of one thing that I said, which was, can we stop giving vaccines to my sick patients and give it to them on the day of discharge? And had they not tried to intimidate me, doubt me, and pushed me to research and show that what I saw was actually real, I would still be lockstep working as a regular doctor.
My experience with discussing or disclosing harms associated with vaccines is that those are not welcome ideas or conversations.
This isn't just one study. It spotlights some massive cracks in the vaccine safety research. Zero long-term head-to-head comparisons like this, rampant conflicts of interest where public health bigwigs cozy up to big pharma, the straight-up suppression of any data that doesn't toe the safe and effective line. It's like the system's rigged to ignore the red flags, leaving parents in the dark while kids pay the price. And speaking of the system, we do need to get real about who's potentially pulling the strings, because no way this reversal happens without pressures from folks like JFK Jr., now heading up Health and Human Services, who's been screaming from the rooftops about this for years. No one has hammered this harder than Robert Kennedy Jr. Listen to him explain why vaccines have never been tested against a real placebo. Take a listen.
What you should do when there are widespread complaints that a product is causing a given harm is you should study it.
Vaccines should be tested like other medicines. They should be safety tested. And unfortunately, vaccines are not safety tested. Of the 72 vaccine doses now mandated, essentially mandated, they're recommended, but they're really mandated, for American children, none of them, not one, has ever been subject to a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. has been torn apart by mainstream media for saying that there's no placebo trials being done for vaccines. But he's right. It's exactly what we found in our lawsuits against the government. Not a single childhood vaccine is going through a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trial prior to licensure. That's the gold standard of safety testing for all pharmaceutical products, but is being skipped for vaccines.
But zoom out, and it's crystal clear for those who want to see it. Does Big Pharma have the whole game on lock? As health expert Dr. Berg lays it out in his no BS breakdowns, this isn't about public good. It's a $1 trillion racket. Vaccines alone? They pull in billions annually for inventors like Pfizer and Merck. Easy money from mandates and school requirements. But here's the twisted genius. Those same shots may spark chronic issues like asthma, autoimmunity, and neurodevelopment disorders, funneling families right back into the medical meat grinder. Think of it, inhalers, specialists, therapies, lifelong medications. It all adds up to billions more in treatment revenue. The inventor cashes in on the jab, the system profits off the fallout, and guess who's the only loser? The kids get the unnecessary vaccines and their families are left holding the emotional and financial wreckage. Dr. Berg nails it. It's a closed loop of control, where money trumps kids' futures every time. Here are some great examples of this from Dr. Peter Abbey, an expert on vaccination campaigns in developing countries, followed by Christine Stabell-Ben, professor of global health, University of Southern Denmark. Take a listen to these two clips.
In the absence of data, my conclusion is that there's no proof that the causation exists.
So if there's no data to show that it causes or it doesn't cause,
Yes.
your supposition is that I understand correctly?
Yes.
Is that it doesn't cause it?
That there's no proof that it does.
Okay, that's different than saying it doesn't cause it, correct?
Correct.
So let's be clear. Vaccine safety is not based on science and data. It's based on an assumption of safety. And that is the stalemate we find ourselves in. But there's one way out of it. Instead of doing a placebo-based study, you can do a retrospective study looking at people that have already made their choice, whether they're going to vaccinate or not. And then you just compare those groups, the ones that got the vaccines and the ones that decided not to vaccinate. We call that the vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. It's been done by a few independent scientists and institutes amongst small groups of children, but never by a major government agency or a major medical facility. The reason this study is important, I think, is illustrated by a study that was done in Guinea-Bissau, Africa, by a man named Dr. Peter Abbey. He's one of the lead experts. He's pro-vaccine, and he develops vaccine programs for the third world. He had a DTP vaccine program he'd run 30 years ago in Guinea-Bissau, Africa, and recognized 30 years later, you know what, only half the children in the country got that vaccine and the other half didn't. I could do a perfect comparative study between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. And when he did that study, the results blew his mind.
This is about vaccines. And I think it's important to recognize that no routine vaccine was tested for overall effect on mortality in randomized trials before being introduced. I guess most of you think that we know what our vaccines are doing. We don't. The program we are talking about at the time, the vaccine program, was introduced sort of in the late 70s after the success with the eradication of smallpox. WHO made sort of the first immunization program for the low-income countries. What comes out here, you had 2.3 times higher mortality if you were DTP vaccinated. And that is the most commonly used vaccine in the world. So the whooping cough vaccine or pertussis vaccine was associated with twofold higher mortality. You can have a vaccine which is fully protective against a specific disease, but associated with higher mortality. How is that possible?
After looking at this study, it was clear that the vaccine did protect against the diseases they were vaccinated for. The kids didn't die of diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Only one problem. Once they looked at it, they were dying at 5 times the rate of all of these other issues. So it was clear that though it was protecting against these diseases, it was weakening their immune systems to all sorts of other problems. One of the other scientists on this study did a TED Talk on this.
In spite of being protected against 3 deadly diseases, the introduction of DTP was associated with increased overall mortality. Children who received DTP vaccine had 5 times higher risk of dying than those who didn't. And this is just one example of many studies now done of DTP vaccine, and they all show the same. DTP vaccinated children have higher mortality than those who didn't get DTP. So it appears that DTP vaccine has negative non-specific effects. The protection against the 3 deadly diseases comes at a very high price, namely increased risk of dying. So, with the best of intentions, the use of DTP vaccine may kill more children than it saves. I know these results are extremely uncomfortable, and most people, including myself, just wish they weren't true. But this is what the data tells us.
That was just a study of one vaccine in a group of children. What if you studied children that were receiving not one vaccine, but between 72 and 100 vaccines by the time they're 18? Of course, I'm talking about the most vaccinated nation in the world, the United States of America.
So, why the censorship? Why has information like this Henry Ford study been shadow banned, fact-checked into oblivion, or straight up memory hold? It's not rocket science, it's self-preservation. Amid a faulty link in the system and the house of cards crumbles, vaccine hesitancy skyrockets, profits plummet, and the narrative of settled science shatters. Social media algorithms bury posts, doctors get muzzled with license threats, and researchers, they learn quick to self-censor or risk the blacklist. Even now, with the CDC's flip, the backlash is fierce. Pediatric groups are screaming debunked while ignoring the polls showing half of autism parents suspect of a vaccine tie, or studies hinting at aluminum adjuvants as environmental triggers. It's all about protecting the storyline. Vaccines as questionable saviors, no room for doubt. But the suppression? It erodes trust, scares families into silence, and keeps us from real solutions like bolstering natural immunity through nutrition, low toxin living, and true informed consent.
I mean, vaccines are the holy grail of modern medicine, and anyone that decides to challenge vaccines in any way are essentially considered heretics.
Vaccines are safe.
Vaccines are safe and effective.
Vaccines are safe and highly effective.
Safe and effective.
Safe and they're highly effective.
Vaccines are one of humanity's most incredible accomplishments, and they've saved millions of lives.
Childhood vaccines have prevented about 4 million deaths around the world every year.
The overwhelming majority of pediatricians in this country strongly support vaccination.
Missing her vaccination dates.
We're not vaccinating.
The schedule as it's currently recommended is well tested.
We've studied them in so many millions of children.
Billions of people.
Decades of extensive peer-reviewed scientific studies.
Centuries of science.
The science is pretty settled.
Settled for many years now.
This idea that we're taking too many vaccines, there's really no science to back that up.
The scientific community publishes paper after paper after paper.
There is nothing to see. There's nothing to see.
I will not stand here and let conspiracy theories distract from a real solution.
But nothing proves the suppression like what happens to doctors who dare run their own honest science. These next 2 clips, these physicians who conducted real-world comparisons, vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids, published the results, and paid the price. Important, guys, watch what the system does to anyone who refuses to stay quiet. Watch video clips 1, 2, and 3 here. Take a listen.
Every independent scientist that has ever ventured into doing a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study of any kind is immediately under assault. There's one by Dr. Anthony Mawson out of Mississippi. He did a homeschool study of about 600 kids and discovered alarming rates of allergies, ADD, ADHD, neurological disorders, and a fourfold increased risk of autism amongst the vaccinated. As soon as the study came out, his job was under threat. In fact, I asked him if he'd be in this film. And he said, look, you can show my studies, but I have just been dragged through the coals on this. I can't take anymore. Then there's Dr. Paul Thomas.
What I noticed in the first decade or so of my practice is kids were getting sicker and sicker. And over the next decade, as more and more patients chose not to vaccinate, I got to see the difference. But I wanted to see, could I prove it? So we got all the data from my practice. We looked at every baby born into my practice and published it in an international journal of public health. What we found, and that study was peer-reviewed, it was robust, we found massive increases. I mean, we're talking 400 to 500% more. Allergies, autoimmune conditions, neurodevelopmental issues, and then we had infections of all kinds. Massively increased in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated. But what happened when I published that study? Within days of it being available online, I get a call from my attorney. Don't go see any patients, don't write any prescriptions, don't go into the office. Your license has been emergently suspended. You are a threat to public health.
Impact of childhood vaccination on short and long-term chronic health outcomes in children, a birth cohort study.
This one is really robust.
I think this is a devastating commentary on our public health interventions, because if this is true, we are systematically making kids sick, and not just a little bit sick, very sick.
Publishing something like that, I might as well retire. I'd be finished.
The study was a bombshell.
18,468 subjects, 1,957 of them were fully unvaccinated. When comparing the health outcomes of the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, they found an increased risk in the vaccinated of several chronic health conditions. The vaccinated subjects were over 4 times more likely to have an asthma diagnosis.
They also found 3 times the risk for atopic diseases,
which is kind of a subset of allergic diseases.
They found almost 6 times risk for autoimmune disease.
The autoimmune diseases this paper looked at include thrombocytopenic purpura, rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus, MS, multiple sclerosis, and Guillain-Barré syndrome. They mentioned there are over 80 different autoimmune diseases, and what their data showed for autoimmunity, 6 times increase in those who got vaccines when compared to the unvaccinated.
Which is staggering, because autoimmune disorders really represent significant morbidity and health costs and suffering, accrued over a lifetime.
5.5 times risk for neurodevelopmental disorders.
2.92 times the amount of motor disabilities. 4.47 times the amount of speech disorders in the vaccinated compared to the unvaccinated.
3 times the rate of developmental delay.
They found the same things I found related to allergy and autoimmunity. Also, 6 times more acute and chronic ear infections.
Interestingly, there were several health conditions where they couldn't even do this analysis because there were none in the unvaccinated group.
For example, there were 262 children who had ADHD in the vaccinated group. Amongst the unvaccinated group, there were 0 cases of ADHD. 0.
These ones are just mind-boggling. These conditions were not found at all in almost 2,000 unvaccinated kids. 0 brain dysfunction, 0 diabetes, 0 behavioral problems, 0 learning disabilities, 0 intellectual disabilities, 0 tics, and 0 other psychological disabilities in the unvaccinated.
Phew, that was heavy, right? But here's the spark of hope. This reversal, messy as it is, opens the floodgates. Advocates are demanding independent, pharma-free research, rock-solid informed consent before any needle. policy overhauls that put child health over corporate ledgers, and a hard pivot to alternatives like breastfeeding, vitamin D, and gut health protocols that build real resilience. Take a listen to these 2 clips.
I'm going to read the conclusion here. Despite this, and in contrast to our expectations, again, the author's expectations was they'd conduct the study and probably find vaccinated people a whole lot healthier than the unvaccinated, right? That's what we found. We found that exposure to vaccination was independently associated with an overall 2.5-fold increase in the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition when compared to children unexposed to vaccination.
Any vaccine, even just one, compared to none, at 2.5 times more likely to have a chronic health condition.
There were no chronic health conditions associated with an increased risk in the unexposed group. None.
They did something called time to event analysis. At 10 years, the likelihood of being free from a chronic illness was only 43% in the vaccinated group versus 83% in the unvaccinated group. It's a big difference.
10 years follow-up. 57% of the vaccinated had a chronic health condition in just 10 years. That should shock everyone.
Let's remember, the entire conversation at the moment in America is the fact that 54% of our children are chronically ill. And here we are looking at the study, and it's almost exactly those numbers. 57% of the vaccinated are chronically ill, whereas only 17% of the unvaccinated.
I think because I have an interest in vaccines and I understand off-target, non-specific effects, I was sad, but I wasn't surprised.
I can tell you that these data are consistent with my greatest concerns regarding the childhood vaccination schedule. That despite the good intentions of the field of vaccinology, that is backfiring on us.
I've seen friends wrestle with diagnoses, second guess every well visit, and fight for answers in a system that feels stacked against them. You're not crazy for questioning. You're a warrior for your kid. It's so important, guys. I encourage you to watch this documentary. Every clip I've been showing you in this video comes from one explosive documentary that lays it all bare. It's called An Inconvenient Study by Del Bigtree and the ICANN team. I'll drop the full film link in the description. Guys, please carve out the time to watch the entire video. It will alarm you with the truth that most doctors never get to tell you. And if you're sitting there asking, okay, my kids, my spouse, me, we've already got these shots, we've already got vaccines, what can we actually do now? I've just dropped a brand new deep dive video breaking down how to safely detox heavy metals like the aluminum and mercury still used in our vaccines, reduce inflammation, and support the body's natural pathways to heal and recover. I talk about chelation protocols, infrared saunas, cilantro, chlorella, zeolite, glutathione support, the whole roadmap that thousands of parents are using to give their kids a fighting chance. I'll link it right at the top of the description and pin it in the comments. I would recommend you watch that video next. It could be the most important next step video you see this year. I know some of you are watching right now and may not agree with anything or some of the things I may have just laid out, and that's totally okay. I'm just a messenger here, and I'm shining light on documents, Senate testimony, and studies that are now public record. If you feel that this is taken out of context or you're fired up to defend the other side, that's your prerogative. Though, I would challenge you to pick up the phone or shoot an email to the researchers themselves, like Marcus Zervas, Louise Lamerato, Henry Ford Health. Reach out to the CDC or contact the media outlets still calling this debunked. That's what going down the real rabbit hole looks like. Getting answers straight from the sources instead of swallowing the prepackaged, paid-for narrative most mainstream media outlets have been spoon-feeding us for decades. You might actually be shocked at what you hear back. To clarify and to reiterate, this video is for information purposes only. It does not replace any medical professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Decisions about your vaccines, detox protocols, or any health intervention should be made with a licensed healthcare practitioner. Your discretion is advised. Well, Thanks for hanging in there with me. It's stories like these that remind us of why I do this channel. To cut through the noise, arm you with truth, and build a community that fights smart. If this fired you up, smash that like, subscribe for more unfiltered deep dives, and drop a comment below. What's your take on CDC's big flip? Hit the notifications bell. You deserve to know. You're not alone. Keep advocating, stay curious, and I'll see you soon.